Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a now extinct Colt modular AR pattern rifle. Now this is a Colt LE-901-16S, which is essentially the same thing as the Colt CM-901. The CM was the military pattern that had a select fire trigger group. The LE is the civilian and law enforcement version, which has a semi-auto only trigger group. Now, this rifle started off as an attempt by Colt to produce a weapon for the SCAR trials circa 2009. Now, it didn't work out for them. They were kind of too late, missed the ball with SCAR, but the idea of the SCAR program, which was the SOCOM Combat Assault Rifle, Special Operations Command Combat Assault Rifle, SCAR, the idea was they wanted to have a modular system of 5.56 or 7.62 millimeter that they could swap out things like scope settings and barrel lengths and that sort of stuff. Now, you're probably familiar with the FN SCARs that were the best outcome of that program. But what Colt was thinking in 2008, 2009 was that they could do this not by having two separate weapons in different calibers, but by actually making one that could accept both 5.56 and 7.62 uppers. So rather than have removable barrels, their plan was to have swappable uppers on a single modular lower that always had the same trigger and the same controls. And then you could just change out what caliber and what barrel length, and because you were swapping the whole upper, whatever optic you had mounted on it was going to stay zeroed. And frankly, Colt came up with a pretty clever mechanical way to do this. So let's dig into the LE-901 here, and let me show you how I can take this rifle and drop, say, this little carbine 5.56 upper onto it. All right, let's take a look at a few of the features here. So I should have mentioned this before, but in 7.62 caliber, these use SR25 mags or Magpul P mags of like totally the standard sort of common now AR-10 magazine. We have Colt Defense, very simple marking on the right side, and then the Colt logo and modular carbine and the serial number here on the left. One of the other interesting things that Colt did with the 901 was give it an ambidextrous mag release and bolt release. And then over here you have a regular mag release, and then that paddle is your right side bolt release. So you can, if you're left-handed, you would insert a mag here and then hit that to release the bolt. Again, humorously, they didn't bother putting an ambidextrous safety on, which to me is by far the most important control to actually make ambidextrous. Now, the theory was that this is a modular rifle, and so there will be lots of different options for calibers and barrel lengths and accessory rails and all sorts of stuff. In reality, there was essentially only one variant that was ever actually produced, and it was a 16.5-inch barrel, which is what we have here. We've got a Vortex flash hider on the end of it. It's a heavy profile barrel, and it has this monolithic upper with a quad rail built in. This is, this is peak early tactical. Now, normally this would have an integral flip-up, flip-down front sight on the gas block. This particular rifle went to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, or Police Department, and they specifically requested not to have that flip-up front sight because they were putting optics on them. So this was just bloop, milled right off. It is also a non-adjustable gas system, which is something that I think would definitely hurt Colt later on trying to sell these on the wider civilian market. It's not going to play particularly well with a suppressor, for example, especially not the early non-flow-through suppressors that were state-of-the-art when this was being produced. All right, now if we take a look at the back end, again, we have some unique elements here because this was a gun ordered specifically by San Bernardino County Police. It has a first-generation Magpul PRS stock on it. Originally, these came from Colt with, I believe, Veltor stocks, a collapsing, much lighter weight stock. This is the configuration that San Bernardino wanted, so that's how they were put together. Okay, now the caliber conversion system. That's the cool part that I think everyone really wants to see. So we'll pull the pins here. We'll pull off separate our upper and lower. You may be noticing that this front pin doesn't look like it's in a normal AR position, and you are correct. It is not, but fear not. There we go. All right, so we pulled this off. That's our 308, our 7.62 upper. All right, now this is my sample regular 5.56 upper that I'm going to use as a demo. This is actually a Troy Gao 5AA, early Vietnam clone upper. And the 901 comes with this little device. This is a magazine spacer. And what you do, you take your lower here. You would, first of all, take out the buffer and replace it with a standard carbine heavy buffer. This was provided with the 901. You got your complete 308 rifle plus this buffer and spring for 5.56 plus this adapter. Now, this is the really clever part. So this is the front pin that connects directly to the 901 lower down here, and then this pin is in the standard position for a regular M4, M16, AR-15 upper. So this, of course, is a magazine well insert that will redimension the magazine well to standard 5.56 to use regular AR mags. In order to convert the gun, I take this magwell adapter and I actually drop it onto my 5.56 upper, pin it in place. This pin is flush, and it becomes, as soon as it has a detent, but as soon as I put it now into the 901 lower, there we go. That pin is now held captive inside the 901 lower. I then lock down, there we go, there's the front pin, and there's the back pin. So my upper, my 5.56 upper is pinned to the magwell insert, which is in turn pinned to the 901 lower. And regular 5.56 magazines now fit, and everything functions. So that has now given me like the world's goofiest looking, like short-ish barreled PRS stock equipped 5.56 carbine. But that's how the 901 system works, and it really is quite clever. Let me take a look at the inside. Let me show you a couple other details. So the thing that made this a challenging project for Colt was not just the fact that the magazines are significantly different in length, but also the fact that the bolts, the bolt assemblies, are also substantially different, not just in length, but also in height. So there's a 5.56 bolt. For reference sake, here is an early AR-10 bolt assembly. And if we compare these two, so I think you see the issue here. Aside from being different lengths, these are also significantly different diameters. If you're going to have one standard lower that works with both of these things, how do you deal with the position of the buffer tube? Because you need both of these carriers to be able to go into the same buffer tube, right? Well, Colt did that by essentially cutting both bolts in half and attaching a 5.56 rear half to a 7.62 front half. So here's the 901 bolt carrier assembly, and you can see it's large diameter up here. We have a big, chunky, large diameter bolt. This is a proprietary piece. Like all the bolt components of the 901 are proprietary. The gas key is set up at 308 height. So you're going to have a thicker barrel out here because the chamber is bigger. So your gas tube is going to be higher. Your gas key has to be higher. That's all fine. It's then connected to a 5.56 diameter rear stem that's stepped down so that it is sitting at the same height that a regular 5.56 gun would be. So the back ends here are the same diameter. The front ends obviously are not, but when we compare our early NATO 7.62 AR, you can see large front, large rear, small rear. So really a pretty clever system. And while this is all proprietary, it allowed them to use all totally standard, non-modified 5.56 existing uppers. Now, we know in retrospect that the rifle wasn't successful in military SCAR program trials. And once Colt realized that, they decided to shift. Backup plan is, of course, sell it to anybody else who might be interested. So they announced it to the public at SHOT Show 2011. Of course, SHOT Show is in January, so it's SHOT Show 2011 is basically the end of 2010. In 2012, the guns were available and in production, and you could order them out of Colt's catalog. And they would stay in the catalog for about 6 years, 7 years. The gun disappeared out of the catalog in 2018. During that time frame, there were a couple changes made. In like 2015, they kind of reimagined it as the Mark 901, the MARC or Modular AR carbine. They changed out the monolithic upper for an upper where you didn't have the rails built in. You could attach rail segments, or you could have a free float tube. They made a couple of attempts at simplifying the gun, I think, and trying to make it more appealing to people. That didn't work. By far the most interesting outcome of this project was the CK-901, the Colt Kalashnikov 901, where they made use of the large magazine well in the 901 lower, built an upper for 7.62x39, set it up to use standard AK mags, and sold them to the military of Yemen. And I actually have a video on one of the CK-901s. I'll link that in the description text below if you're interested. That's by far the most interesting. The problem Colt had was they just didn't have a good market for a modular rifle like this. The problem is you're paying a premium for the modular features, for the R&D that went into it, and for the extra components, like this little guy, that have to be manufactured, and there are compromises around a modular system. And the problem is there aren't a whole lot of benefits to it. For most people, the idea of a modular AR means you're either going to assemble it as a short, light 5.56 carbine, or as like a longer barreled, heavier precision rifle in 7.62. There isn't a whole lot of practical demand for a short barreled 7.62 NATO carbine. Yeah, there are some out there, but for most people, a modular gun like this is really going to be a significant compromise for either of the real purposes that it's intended for. And most people and most agencies would prefer to, if they're really going to use guns of both types, they're just going to get two different guns and optimize each gun to each purpose. There's not a lot of practical situations where you're going to be carrying this gun and this upper and ammunition for both of them and have to swap on the fly and actually get a benefit from having a modular changeable rifle. Yeah, there's a potential value for this in an armorer's, the armorer's armory of an organization that needs guns in both types. But again, they're really going to be better suited, and most people are going to gravitate towards just building ideal versions of the rifle, of two separate rifles, instead of having one modular do-it-all gun. So, like I said, Yemen bought some of these. The Malaysian military apparently bought a small number, and they made some sales to police forces, like, for example, the San Bernardino County SWAT team, who bought apparently 5 of them, or at least resold 5 of them in 2021, which is where this one comes from. So the gun is gone now. Like I said, it exited Colt's catalog in 2018. They're sort of a cult popular gun. As far as I can tell, they were really good guns. They were just a compromise that nobody really actually needed, or at least not enough people needed to justify ongoing production by Colt. So, big thanks to the viewer who sent me this one on loan, one of the Bernardino County Sheriff turn-in guns that he picked up a couple years ago. Very cool to get a chance to take a look at these. It's funny, the last time I looked at one of these was, like 2012 or 2013 when they came out, and I actually wrote a text review for TFB, not TFB TV, but the original TFB blog about the Colt 901. So if you want a blast from the past, you can search that up and see what I had to say about this rifle back 10 plus years ago. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.